I bet you didn't know some retail collapses are planned around debt, not demand. When a chain fails, everyone asks one question: who caused the crash? But the real question is harder: who turned debt into leverage first? Debt sounds boring until it becomes a weapon with deadlines. In retail, the first targets are usually suppliers who can't fight back. You don't need a villain, just pressure, paperwork, and timing. Imagine this: the chain is already shaky, then credit tightens overnight. That's when debt becomes leverage against payroll, deliveries, and rent. If you've ever wondered why closures feel abrupt, it's usually scheduling, not surprise. The paperwork can be moving months before customers notice anything. Here's the trick: debt can be used to force a reshuffle of who owes what. When cash tightens, companies push losses outward, fast and legally careful. Customers think the store is simply closing. Creditors think about collateral. Collateral is where debt turns personal, because it can seize assets you can't replace. So the company moves inventory, leases, and licenses into different boxes, different entities. I bet you didn't know debt holders often prefer speed over truth when things go bad. They don't need the story to be perfect, only the terms to be enforceable. And that's how corporate collapse can feel like theft, even when it's legal. One day the chain offers discounts. The next, it cancels orders and stops paying. Suppliers get hit with delays, reconciliations, and new rules they didn't vote on. Those words buy time. Time buys leverage for the debt side. Then comes the restructure talk, quiet, technical, and emotionally distant. Restructuring can sound like healing, but sometimes it's surgery without consent. Debt can be repackaged so that old obligations look smaller to everyone watching. Meanwhile, obligations still exist, just assigned to the weakest entity in the chain. If a store's pension or wages are tied up, workers become the buffer zone. I bet you didn't know the fastest way to reduce backlash is to delay recognition. Payables keep piling while public statements stay calm and confident. But behind those statements, debt covenants can tighten like a noose. Covenants are rules the borrower must obey, or else default triggers happen. And once default hits, some creditors get paid first, others get promised later. That's where who gets left behind becomes a design choice, not an accident. Retail chains often owe money to many groups at once: rent, goods, utilities, labor. Debt can reorder that stack overnight, pushing some claims above the rest. Then comes the going concern, argument. Maybe the business is saving itself. But saving itself can mean saving insiders, not customers or workers. I bet you didn't know that some executives are paid during rescue talks. If you're thinking, that can't be legal, it still might be, through structure. Debt and restructuring paperwork can create distance between cause and consequence. At that point, the collapse becomes a transfer mechanism, moving pressure to others. So, what do warning signs look like before the public hears financial trouble? First, the language changes. Less about customers, more about risk and liquidity. Second, inventory moves around like it's being hidden from the wrong claims. Third, vendors get asked for more protections, at the company's risk. And when they refuse, orders shrink. Deadlines get weaponized. That's when suppliers realize they might be financing the collapse. Then they stop shipping. Too late to save the chain, just early enough to be blamed. I bet you didn't know shortages can be manufactured by controlling credit terms. If you can't deliver, you can't sell. If you can't sell, debt gets worse. So the company's leverage grows precisely when the chain appears most fragile. What happens next is the part customers feel: order cancellations and refund confusion. Gift cards are another storm. Debt can turn them into a fundraising mirror. You load money for promises. Then the promise gets reclassified, delayed, and contested. Meanwhile, the company's cash isn't shrinking evenly. It's moving to whoever has first claim. This is why two collapses can look identical in headlines, but behave differently in the aftermath. The legal filings might read neutral. The lived impact never feels neutral. I bet you didn't know debt can buy silence from those who could expose it. Vendors fear retaliation if they sue. Workers fear losing what's left. So claims get delayed, settlements get negotiated, and the story slows down. But the collapse doesn't stop moving. It just changes owners of the pressure. Sometimes a new company appears with a similar name and a cleaner balance sheet. I bet you didn't know people can walk away looking like rebranding, not wrongdoing. Debt can be left behind while the brand keeps selling, until the cycle repeats. This is how corporate collapse becomes a business model, not a tragedy. So how do you spot the debt weapon before the store empties out? Look for sudden credit changes, not just sales drops. Look for vendors being pushed into agreeing to new terms fast. Look for restructuring language paired with aggressive asset movement. And look for customers being treated like the last line of funding. Cash arrives from shoppers. Then the company tries to keep it, while shifting losses away. In the final weeks, refunds get delayed, communication gets selective, and promises get vague. I bet you didn't know we're working on it. Can be a legal strategy too. Words can buy time, and time can decide who survives the next payment cycle. When the closure finally lands, it's already too late for many victims to organize. By then, the debt weapon has already done its job: redirect attention away from the structure. So the story becomes, they just couldn't compete. That's the easy lie. Competition doesn't explain selective payments, shifting entities, and sudden credit pivots. It explains something else: leverage planning across the supply chain. And leverage planning can hide behind the word strategy, not weapon. If this feels familiar, it's because corporate collapses share patterns across industries. Retail is just the place where you can see the consequences fastest.